All right, class. Welcome again today. We have Stan Solo with us, and he is going to talk to us about his fandom. He's also going to talk to us about a few different podcasts, or the Solo Show. He hosts the Grand Circle Tour. He hosts Disney in the Night Live, and just started Womp Rat Radio that focuses on Star Wars. So we have a lot of things that we're going to talk to Stan about. Let's go ahead and get started in welcoming Stan to the class. And Stan, if you could tell us kind of your history of becoming a Disney fan, how you became a Disney fan, and how you got into the space to create all of the content that you're creating.
Okay, well, first of all, let's go into how I became a Disney fan. I'm going to go back to my childhood. This is pre-Star Wars. This is before 1977. There used to be a show called The Wonderful World of Color. I'm in Canada, and it would air every Sunday night on CBC. And I call him Uncle Walt, but Walt Disney was the host of the show. And obviously, Walt passed away before I was born, but they were in reruns. And he would always show clips of Disneyland in the show. They would show movies, they would show it's kind of like Disney Plus, but it was only one show a week. And Walt would introduce the show every week. He would come on and then he would be talking about Disneyland. And I was probably, I'm thinking 7, 6, 8, around that age. And Disneyland looked like such an amazing place. They had the submarines, they had sky buckets, they had monorails, they had trains, they had a Tomorrowland, they had a Frontierland. Davy Crockett was walking around. Like I wanted to go there. So I'd say to my mom, let's go. We got to go. We got to go to Disneyland. This is a real place. We can go visit it. And growing up in Canada, in a bit not North Canada, not too north, but north enough, my mom would be like, "You're not going. Like it's too far. It's too expensive. It's not happening. Like just get it out of your mind." So then Star Wars came along, and of course my fandom kind of shifted to Star Wars, and I became a huge Star Wars fan. I became known as like the Star Wars kid. I grew up in a small town. The I got older and I got married and had kids of my own, it was like, okay, we're gonna go to Disney World. We're gonna go to Disneyland. Actually, I didn't even know. That's how naive I was. I'm in my 20s. Didn't even know there was a Disney World. I only knew Disneyland. And I'm like, okay, talking to my wife, we're gonna go to Disneyland. And she says, well, yeah, someday. Before I knew it, my oldest was 16 and we still hadn't gone. It was something I always wanted to do, always wanted to experience. So I said, we're going to go. I'm going to pay for it. I don't care what it costs or whatever. It's something we have to do. So I started researching uh, Walt Disney World at Disneyland. And at the time, and then I kind of discovered Disney World. And I realized that these are two different things altogether. The Disney World, Disneyland, California, Florida. I started doing really a lot of research and I started going on different blogs and different websites. And the more I researched, the more I studied, the more fascinated I became. And Disneyland became a distant memory, and now it was Disney World. Disney World is going to be where we're going. We booked uh, the resort at Port Orleans Riverside, flights, we got dining plan, we got our tickets ahead. We're going to go for a week. And it just kept, and then I started, I was into Star Wars I was since 77. I was a big Star Wars fan. So when podcasts came out, I started listening to Star Wars podcasts. And I got to thinking, I wonder if there's a Disney podcast. So I went on podcast search at Walt Disney World, and WW Radio with Lou Mangello came up. That was like the first podcast of the Disney one that I listened to. And I started listening to Lou's podcast. Well, I was still listening to different Disney or Star Wars ones. And I started listening to more Disney podcasts and started getting more, and I started buying books. And I had a whole year to plan. And by the time we were able to go to Walt Disney World, I already felt like I had been there because I researched so much about it. I already knew every attraction. I knew the wait times. I knew where to go. I knew everything about Disney World by the time it was time to go. Uh, we went. This was going to be our one and only trip. Was never going to be able to go again. We got home. We had such a good time. I didn't even unpack. Put the suitcases down. Picked up the phone. called to book it for the following year, this time for 2 weeks. And I've been going ever since. And now my wife has kind of lost interest. My kids have lost interest, and I go by myself mostly. I just go, and I did a few trips. I would go by myself and not talk to anyone other than cast members. And then I started getting to the Disney community more and more. Started making friends, and now when I go to Disney World, I'm not by myself anymore. It's a community, and I'm having meetups everywhere, every day, to every hour. Is I'm meeting up with somebody when I go. Uh, so it's funny how much it's grown just over the past few years.
Well, and what's really cool that that we'll get into here in just a little bit is you talking about this sense of community when you go.
Hmm.
And I have definitely seen it online, um, that when somebody asks a question, there's 20 people willing to chime in to help out. And it's beyond just this idea of visiting the parks. If something people share accomplishments in their personal lives or their professional lives outside of Disney, and it is this sense of family, extended family that some people have never met each other, but there's this sense of family that people feel because of this common interest with Disney, which is extremely interesting to me for many reasons. We talked before we started recording about what I research and what I write about, and writing about group behavior and how groups treat each other. It's so interesting to me to see this idea of Disney being this common interest. So would you say your kind of main entry to the Disney space, if you will, is through the theme parks?
Yes, yeah. I mean, growing up, I would watch the movies, and I enjoyed them, and I enjoyed other movies as well. But it was the theme parks that really attracted me. It was the theme parks that I really wanted to get to know more and study and research much more than anything else.
And it's always you mentioned the Wonderful World of Color, um, and before that, the television series Disneyland, being how Walt Disney and the company raised money to build the physical Disneyland.
Hmm.
That idea of him appearing weekly on television and people identifying with him, kind of building this persona of Uncle Walt as people came to know
Yeah,
him. And then him inviting everyone into this space. Here's what I've built for everyone. Please come enjoy. And when you're here, all of your troubles from the outside world are going to melt away for as long as you're here. It really is such a cool story when you think of the diversions that that we create or the diversions that we participate in, to take ourselves out of kind of those everyday hassles or some of the troubles we have to deal with and everything. Um, it's really interesting, and you are very active on in the Disney space and the social media. Um, and so it's really cool to hear your story and kind of how you got into it as well. I think you were going to say something though. I apologize.
well, yeah, like how you were talking about like the Wonderful World of Color. There isn't anything like that right now. Disney Plus is sort of doing that. They have the Animal Kingdom series, they have the Imagineers series, but I think they could do more to promote the park for the next generation. I mean, I know Disney World is packed a bit pre-COVID. You couldn't. It was packed. Disneyland
Mhm.
is packed. You can't fit any more people in there most nights. But I always wonder about I always worried about the future, and are they planning anything to keep the next generation wanting to come and to keep it going? Uh, so it's to me, if I was owning Disney, I would have, and the social media I think is a big part of it. I think the
Hmm.
social media uh, part is kind of Disney's Wonderful World of Color now,
Hmm.
where it's hard to get on. At least for
Yeah.
myself, it's hard to get on Facebook without seeing the word Disney
Yeah.
pop up.
It,
It's
it
impossible.
50 times in your feed, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Every other story has something to do with Disney.
Mm,
That and that's even if you're a non-Disney fan, you're inundated with Disney because of everything that they own now. They're such a media conglomerate now that
yeah.
um so what do you think it is about the quote unquote Disney space? Why do people one kind of engage with Disney, and then how does that kind of expand to where people become friends and there's this sense of community and sense of family? And again, with some people that, as I said, have never physically met, have never spoken, but there's this bond between people. What do you think causes that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people, like, it's like interests. You're in the same type of similar interests. Um, and as far as, I think it doesn't have to be Disney. I think it could be just about any fandom. Like when I was not so much into Disney, more into Star Wars, which I am still a huge big Star Wars fan. Uh, I would go on Star Wars chat boards or read Starlog magazine when I was a kid, or the Star Wars Insider would come out, and I would read that, and it's what you would consume. And then you find out, if you're a kid in a schoolyard, or if you're someone at work and you find someone at work or that is also into Star Wars or into your fandom, regardless what it is, you're going to kind of hit it
Mhm.
off. You got a commonality, and it's something that you're going to kind of get along with that.
And so one another aspect of fandom is, you said you have these connections with different fans or different of people who have similar interests as you.
Yeah.
Um, and another aspect that we talk about in the class is fan created content. This class being an example of that.
Hmm.
The podcast that comes from this class that some people are listening to being an example of that. This idea that fans want to they engage with the brand so much that they want to keep creating content. And I think Star Wars is a great example because of all of the long stretches of times between the movies, between
Yeah.
the theatrical releases. Now, there were books and comics and stories in between there. There was even a holiday special. There's a new holiday special on Disney Plus that I think is being received a little bit better. But the where there was almost this void of creating or of new created content, fans started creating their own content. And so I'll use that into a transition to talk to us about the shows that you produce and host, what those shows are about, and how you started creating those shows.
Yeah. So the first one, my very first podcast that I was on was actually on WDW radio with Lou Mangello, who was like the first Disney podcast I
Mhm.
listened to. We kind of became friends online, on through social media, through me listening to his podcast and going on his Facebook page and chatting. And he was wanting to do a show about people going to the park solo. Well, what better person to have than a guy named Solo, who
Mhm.
goes solo to the park? So I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, I understand you're looking for someone that does solo trips." And so that was my very first time being on a podcast, was that episode. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much. And I got a lot of feedback from a lot of friends and people I never met before, and are now my friends through that one show. And I kind of got to thinking, I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was wanting to do one of my own. And I had a friend that he lives in North Dakota, and him and I were kind of talking back and forth. And it was actually going to be uh, not a Disney one or a Star Wars one. It was going to be about music,
Okay.
and about like parody songs. Like, I'm a big
Okay.
fan of Weird Al, and
Yeah.
that's what we were kind of thinking. But the problem is, you can't really play. like music without getting
Hmm.
permission first on a podcast. So it's hard for us to play a song when we're not allowed to play a song and then talk about it. So that was never going to happen. And I got a message from a guy, and he says, "Hey, you want to be in a podcast? I'm putting together a group of guys, and we're going to a group of people. We're going to do a podcast." And I said, "Yeah, I was actually thinking of doing one." So he got together 8 of us, and then decided he didn't want to do it. He left, and the rest of us were kind of sitting there. Well, we want to do it, so we created our own podcast. We went on without the guy that started it all, and that's how the Grand Circle Tour came to be.
Okay.
And there was eight of us. If you're doing a podcast with 8 people, it's not going to work. It's you're I mean, maybe we'll, I mean, and we have done episodes, we call them actually adventures, because it's a tour you're on, and we
Hmm.
call them adventures. We have done adventures where there have been all 8 of us, but we have to have like a ringleader that kind of controls
Hmm.
everything. So what we do is we have 3 people on at a time, and we make a schedule, and each week a different person is responsible, because we don't really have a leader in the Grand Circle Tour. There isn't a bona fide leader. We have the 8 of us, and we're all an 8th owner of the show. So each week there'll be 3 of us, and as a listener, you have no idea who's coming up that week. It's going to be a different 3 people. We don't have, this is the 3 and the 2 or whatever.
Okay.
This is we all get along. We all have a thing. So every 8 weeks, I'm in charge of the show. So I got to pick a topic. I got to let the other people know what the topic is. We always record the same time. We record Sunday night, um, and that's how that one works. And it's always just about Disney, Disney Cruise Line, Pixar, Star Wars, whatever we want. But it has to be in the Disney bubble. Is
Hmm.
basically what the rules are. My favorite thing to do when I was in charge every 8th week was to have a guest. And I would have a celebrity, a non-celebrity, somebody, because I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy finding out what their stories, where they're from, stuff like that. And it would usually be somebody that I'm Facebook friends with, or whatever, or watch on YouTube. It could be a Disney YouTuber or something. So I would bring them on the show, and I would have my 2 co-hosts with me. Sometimes they know a little bit about the person, sometimes they know nothing about the person. So let's say it's a YouTuber that I watch, but they don't. So I know everything about them. I've been watching them on YouTube for the past 6 months, for the past year, the past 2 years, whatever. I know what questions to ask them, and my 2 co-hosts are kind of sitting there not knowing what to ask or what to say or what to do. And it became awkward. So I decided I'm going to start my own podcast, and it's going to be a different guest every week, or different,
Hmm.
I call them a co-host. With a co-host, you don't have to be nice to them. With a guest, you got to be nice. So I can razz a co-host a little bit. So I have a different co-host every week, and that's how the solo show started.
Okay.
Was because through that. So I didn't want to leave the Grand Circle Tour, because I really enjoyed doing the Grand Circle Tour, but I wanted to continue the solo show. So this Grand Circle Tour has been going for 3 years now. Solo show, we just had our 1-year anniversary or birthday this past week, and I have a friend of mine, actually he's a coworker of mine that used to work in radio. His name is Ken, voiceover guy Ken. So he introduces the show, he does all the editing. So all I have to do is book a guest, record with them, record it to the cloud, and then Ken does the rest.
Hmm.
So if it wasn't for Ken, it wouldn't be a solo show. He's like my partner in this, but he's
Yeah.
kind of a silent partner. He introduces us and he takes us away, and that's it. Uh, then Disney Night Live came about. A friend of mine, David Picciano, that again, I never met David. I never met the majority of the Grand Circle Tour people in person yet. We've been going together for 3 years. You talk about not meeting people.
Yeah.
I met one of them just because I happened to be at Disneyland at the same time as her, and one of my co-hosts, Mindy. I met her in person, and I met one in Disney World, because we planned it. We booked it at the same time in October. Went to the Halloween party together, and I met another one during D23 Expo, George, and then Justin. We brought on board after somebody left, because we wanted to keep the dynamic of 8. We brought Justin on board, and Justin was a good friend of mine that I was originally going to do the original first podcast with. Was Justin.
Yeah.
So Disney Night Live, David was doing a podcast, a live show on from Now That's Disney by himself, and it was bad. It was it wasn't good. He didn't know what he was doing. He was basically sitting on his bed with his beer talking Disney to himself, and it was awkward. But he had an interest in Disney, and he always commented on my Facebook posts, and he always had something positive to say. He was a very positive guy. And so I messaged him and I said, you know what? I said, I like what you're doing, but I think I could help you. I think if we did it together for a couple of weeks and see how that worked. So we started doing that. It's been over a year now, and we started off doing Friday nights, and we would do the live show, and we got a little bit of an audience. It got to be pretty good. And I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are or anything, but Big Fat Panda, John
Mhm.
Sakari. So after Dave and I were doing it for a few months, I guess about 6 months or so, I said, "Hey, let's bring a guest on." I said, "I'm friends with John Sakari, Big Fat Panda. We could bring him on, and we could, talk about his podcast and his YouTube channel." So David said, "Yeah, I'd love to have Panda on. That'd be great." So we brought John on for a one-time appearance. And David said, "John, you're welcome back anytime. Okay, so this would have been April, I'm guessing, because this was right about when the COVID was starting and
Okay.
John was at home. So David said, "You can come on anytime." And John goes, "Well, I can't go anywhere. If you want, I can come back next week." And we haven't gotten rid of the guy. He's been he's been with us ever since. So he's been on and we moved it to Saturdays. And we used to be Disney Night Live, and we used to be Friday Night Live, kind of like as a spin on Saturday Night Live.
Mhm.
When we moved to Saturdays, well, we weren't going to call it Saturday Night Live. So that's when we changed the name to Disney Night Live. And we developed quite a following with that one. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing those Disney Night Live Saturday nights with David and Panda. Then I got a neat message one day from Sam from the Disney Nerds. This was fairly recent, asking if I wanted to come on Womp Radio. And I said, "Yeah, sure, when?" And he tells me when. I said, "Okay." And I thought it was one show. I thought he wanted me to come on as a guest for one show. I had no idea. So we did the show. It was a lot of fun. It was great. And he messages me, "Here's the link for next week." Oh, am I? It's just because I think I came on. It was like around episode 4 or 5,
Yeah.
and like, oh, so I guess sure. So, and I've been doing that ever since. So it's been becoming part of that group, and we're starting to get a bit more closer. And that's with the Disney Nerds, and it's great how I'm friends with a lot of different podcasters,
Yeah.
and we just get along. Like you would think in a lot of areas, this would be competition.
Mhm.
Like we're all fighting for our listeners. We all want more downloads. We all want more Facebook likes. We all want more Instagram posts. But for myself, I feel like we're a family. Everybody, if I could get another listener from Monorail Tales, I'll get another listener from Monorail
Mhm.
Tales and have them come on my show. If I can get Corey to get another download, Corey, come on my show. Let's see if I can help you out. And that's what I love about the community, is that everybody kind of helps each other out.
Yeah. And I like the description of the four different groups. It's almost like the Knights of the Round Table with the Grand Circle Tour,
It is.
where everybody kind of shares. And then um, John he spoke to the class this last semester, so he's been on, and we've talked about some of the things that he does. And Lou was actually the second guest to visit with the class. He was gracious enough to talk about kind of his journey to moving closer to Disney, as well as John was. And this idea of what you mentioned, having this everybody have who has a podcast having this sense of family. And that's been really interesting to me as well, because you do have, people are trying, they're running their own podcasts, but it doesn't seem as though uh, there is that fierce competition, or the negativity associated with
Yeah.
it. It really is, hey, you're a fan of Disney, let's talk, and
Hmm.
let's have instead of this competition, let's have each other on shows, and let's share content with each other, and let's have these discussions, which has been honestly the coolest thing about me being able to teach this class, is having these conversations with everyone. And the content that we cover in class is a lot of fun. And when we started the class, my intent was to watch walkthrough videos and ride through videos of the parks, and I asked students what they wanted to hear, and they just opened the doors to. They wanted the history of the company, they wanted the history of Walt himself, and the acquisitions, and so, as I said, it gave me this reason to teach this class, to just do this deep dive into all these different areas, which is really something I've been wanting to do for a long time as a fan anyway. And but it's just so great to be able to talk with students about that content, but also have these conversations and find out where people are coming from in their fandom, and why they're identifying, and kind of see some of the common ties or common reasons people identify with a brand, with the brand, and then with the theme parks. And um, so one thing that I want to transition to talking about is, and by the way, the solo show has one of the coolest logos I've ever seen. That was one of the first things I noticed when I came across it, uh, and and the in Star Wars, I always identified with Han Solo. You know, when I was younger,
You did.
yeah, yeah, I know. You, when I was younger, I always thought, you should identify with Luke. Luke's the one who walks the straight and narrow and everything, um, but then as you get older and you kind of know more about the story, Han Solo, Chewbacca, the Millennium Falcon, all of that became kind of more my world, with Star Wars fandom.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to put that out there, because that's one of the first thing I've noticed about your show, and anytime you interact, is I just always think, man, that is such a cool logo. And
Oh, thank you.
how 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 serendipitous or awesome is it to have that last name, to be able to use that as your branding.
It
um
it was funny because it took me a long time to come up with the name of the show, and I couldn't think of anything. And then I got to thinking, I'm like, well, I'm doing the show on my own, and I go to Disney World on solo trips. So why not just? I'm also a big fan of the Muppet Show, and it's also on StarWars.com, the Star Wars show.
mhm,
So I'm thinking the Muppet Show, the Star Wars show, the Stolo show. Hey, there you go,
yeah,
that works. And then the logo was I was actually on the flight home from Disneyland, and I was trying to think of a logo, and for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything. Then all of a sudden, it just kind of popped in. And it was funny because it was a flight home from Disney World when I came up with the name for the solo show, and it was a flight home from Disneyland when I came up with the logo idea. And originally, I had the mouse ears on both
mhm,
O's, and my wife said, "No, no, that's you got to change that to the one O."
yeah.
It was too busy. So,
The
well, thank
inspiration, yeah, no, thank you for sharing it. The inspiration people find from Disney is great. Is always fun to hear about. Um, One thing I want to transition to is, on the topic of solo, um, and you now being associated with Womprat Radio, uh, is when I teach this class, I'll talk to students, and let's say there's 20 students in a class. When I talk to students in the class and I ask, are you a fan of Marvel? 17, 18 people raise their hand,
Mhm.
because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so huge now. It's contemporary, it's out, um, in the public eye.
Mhm.
When I ask, how many fans are how many people would consider yourself a fan of Star Wars? I'll have two or three people raise their hands, which
Wow.
I've always been really interested by, because I grew up, um, I was born right before before Return of the Jedi came out.
Mhm.
And so I've always kind of thought, the original trilogy was the best. However, I have enjoyed every Star Wars movie that has come out, some more so than others, some less than others.
I
But
agree with that.
um, I've been interested in this idea of the 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 younger generations, um, their kind of attachment to Marvel and to the MCU, and I've really gotten into the MCU as well,
Mhm.
because of everything they've been doing. And but what do you think it is, or I guess another way of asking it is, how do you think Star Wars, the franchise, the brand, how does it engage with new fans? How does it attract new fans? How does it keep fans going? Because, I mean, people that are older and then we've grown up with the movies, well, it is a surprise to us. However, it's just something interesting. How do you think they are
Well,
able to do that?
after Disney took over, they made some changes immediately. There was a series that Lucasfilm was going to come out with. It was a cartoon series called Detours. I'm not sure if how familiar you or any of your class members are of it, but check it out on YouTube. It's Star Wars Detours, and it was kind of like a Lego style humor,
Okay.
where it's Star Wars, but it's not Star Wars. And it was going to be, I should say, it's like a Star Wars Lego type of humor, Lego Star Wars type of humor. Uh, and it was going to be like the Death Star was being built in secret, but how do you keep it in secret? Well, they were telling everybody it was going to be a mall.
Okay.
And Princess Leia was like a mall brat, and so she'd want to go to the Death Star and hang out with her friends because it was a mall, and
Yeah.
it was a very much a comedy. And Darth Vader was a bumbling idiot. So when Disney took it over, they got rid of the dance parties that they would have with Darth Vader dancing on stage. They didn't want, and they got rid of detours. They didn't want to introduce kids to the first time to Star Wars as it being Darth Vader's a bumbling idiot and
Mhm.
dancing on stage and whatnot. They wanted it to be more serious. And I think they made a mistake when they did that. And they came up with the new movies and they made the movies to try to make them dark. They're trying to make them, they seemed like they were going after you and yourself and
Mhm.
myself as fans, which is great for us. And they did wanted to disassociate themselves with the prequels. They didn't
Mhm.
want to have Jar Jar Binks. If you notice on the, I hate to spoil it, but the latest edition of the Mandalorian, they don't call them Metachlorians, they call them
Mhm.
M count.
Mhm.
So uh, they were keeping us happy, but they didn't think about the next generation so much. And I think that was a mistake. With Baby Yoda coming into the scene now with the Mandalorian, they're getting more fans now than ever into the Star Wars universe. My wife is now watching the Mandalorian, and she's never watched a Star Wars anything before. She's now interested in Star Wars. I have friends that are coming up to me at work that never ever mentioned Star Wars in their lives. They're now like, "Hey, I'm watching this Baby Yoda
Mhm.
show." So I think that's is going to help. I think that that's going to really help bring new fans in, and now they got the Galaxy's Edge in the parks that they're opening. That's going to bring. They're working at it. Is something that I think eventually it's going to be. Hopefully, 2 years from now or a year from now, when you ask your class of 20 how many are Marvel fans and how many are Disney fans or how many are Star Wars fans, the numbers will be pretty equal. Is what
Mhm.
I'm is what I'm hoping for,
Well,
and I think it will be. I think they will. I think they're going down the right path now.
and that's kind of what I've looked, and I've heard that before about people saying like I'm watching the Baby Yoda show. It's so,
Mhm.
and the progression of, or the, I guess, the character progression of the child and of the Mandalorian is this this season in particular is now, I think any parent can understand that. Some of the situations that they get into,
Mhm.
um, I think parents can understand, like, trying to tell when he's trying to tell the child to do something or to help out, and that kind of lack of translation and that lack of understanding between an adult and a child. I think that's of trying to, like, do a certain task. Um,
Or the child will do something that will completely go, "Wow, I didn't know you could do that."
yeah,
I've
yeah,
had that happen with my
and
kids as well growing up.
it's something that is just, I've noticed in this season that th- the first season, you're completely correct. They came across the child, and or as people love to call him, Baby Yoda,
Mhm.
and hey, that is a connection right there. And then so they are making him now more central to every story. And then so they are going after kind of those new fans, trying to get them in that way. And then the fans who go back to the prequels, go back to um, the original trilogy,
Mhm.
the prequels, the ones that Disney released later. All of the people who we have paid attention to certain things, there's something in those shows for us. And even beyond someone like myself who I never watched, I didn't watch the whole Rebel series or Clone Wars series. There's things in it for those fans as well. I mean, you know, 2 weeks ago, and this season being a great example of that. And you mentioned Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and so we've been one time. We went 2 weeks after it opened in Walt Disney World,
Mhm.
and so I was really afraid that it was going to be crowded, and we were trying to get to Toy Story Land more so because of the age of my
Yeah.
two kids. Um, but when they created Galaxy's Edge, it was not a museum. It is something that people can engage with now. And so give us your thoughts on Galaxy's Edge, and included in that, the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. If you've been on Rise of Resistance, your
Yeah, a couple
thoughts
times.
kind of on that whole, on everything that they're building and how that affects people.
It's interesting how you mentioned Marvel versus Star Wars. Uh, I think they're doing Marvel extremely well in the parks. Paris is having one thing going on. Tokyo's going to have something else going on. Hong Kong's having something else going on. Disneyland is going to have. Unfortunately, Disney World can't have too much, but
If
they're
only
doing Marvel.
contracts could be worked out, right?
Yeah, they got contracts to work on. They got the Galaxy's Edge roller coaster or Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah,
Guardians
Guardians
of
of
the
the
Galaxy,
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster company. So they're doing what they can. The Galaxy's Edge, I love it. Don't get me wrong. It's like my favorite part of Disney World now. The Rise of Resistance attraction is my number one favorite attraction of all time, hands down. Not even close to it's the second. It's amazing. But they should have done two different lands.
Okay.
Yes, it's cheaper. Yes, it's quicker. Yes, it's all this and that. But to have Disney California and have Florida with the exact same
Oh, okay.
land, it's bothersome to me. I don't know. I mean, I love it, but do I want to see it? Do I want to make a special trip to California to see the exact same thing I just saw in Florida?
Yeah, that's true. That's
If
true.
I'm a big Star Wars fan, that's I would go to both.
Hmm.
Uh, but you don't have to
Yeah.
because there's no point.
Yeah.
So it would be nice if there was more to it than what it was. They have the two attractions and the lightsaber build and the droid building and a couple of restaurants and the bar. Uh, it's I love it, but I wish it was bigger and more. Sorry, what was the question?
No, I wanted to see
Opinion of
your
it? Yeah,
impressions of
yeah. That's my
of
impressions
that.
of it, and I think that the app where you could go around and scan different things and translate different things is something that they need to promote more because for families and for a solo traveler, it's something that is an extra layer.
Hmm.
Or Lou would say the extra layer of the onion. Uh, to have the different things, those things to do, just walking around
Yeah.
and exploring is. Have you done the app at all?
Well,
And did the translate? Played the games.
so when we got on, or when we went, as I said, we had the trip planned for 6 months,
Hmm.
and then I find out 2 weeks before we're going to be there, Galaxy's Edge is opening,
Hmm.
and my Star Wars fan is thinking, "Hey, this is awesome. I'm going to see a fully built Millennium Falcon."
Yes.
right? I'm going to see they never built a full Millennium Falcon for any of the movies. I am going to see a fully built Millennium Falcon. I'm going to cry. This is going to be awesome. As a father, I'm thinking, oh no, I wonder if now Hollywood Studios is going to be just jammed packed. What
Mm-hmm.
they did at that time, if you remember though, is they opened up extra magic hours for every park,
Yep.
which was amazing.
Yep.
And they opened up 3 hours of extra magic hours at Hollywood Studios. So we got there. We didn't get there right at 6. We got there probably 7 is when we walked into the park, I think. And so we did the first thing we did is walk through Galaxy's Edge because people who've been to the parks know that it does connect to Toy Story Land. That was where I knew we were going to spend the most amount of time. But we walked through Galaxy's Edge to see what it was and to see if it was crowded. And I mean, it's amazing. You're walking by, here's an X-Wing, which now we know was actually used in filming of The Mandalorian, which is like another kind of cool nugget for Star Wars fans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we are approaching that iconic part of the park where you're going to see the unveiling of the Millennium Falcon, and I'm already thinking about, how awesome this is going to be. A stormtrooper walks up and kind of scares the two boys, and so the the big unveiling kind of turned into, oh, that's really cool. Let's get out of here because let's get to something that is going to be a little more enjoyable. We went with a set of grandparents. We ended up, my father-in-law and I did the single rider line for Millennium Falcon so we could have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Later on during the day, I did have a reservation at Oga's Cantina that we went back. And when we went back later in the day, we explored it more. The boys um, were maybe more awake. They definitely thought it was cool the second time we went through.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
stormtroopers jumping out and scaring them.
so that first impression was, yeah, I was like, hey, there's this app that we can play with, and then all of a sudden it was like, nope, we're we're kind of moving through so we can get to Toy Story Land. So
Mhm.
it's a little more enjoyable situation for everybody. um but one thing that I have thought with, again, from teaching this class is, um do you do you think the future of Star Wars is on Disney Plus with the Disney Plus series? And in what they're going to do with trying to combine what they're doing on Disney Plus with Galaxy's Edge, do you think that's the future of Star Wars for a lot of fans? Or do you think they are going to continue to have big tentpole theatrical releases? And I know they'll continue to do that, but do you think there's going to be more emphasis on kind of the path they're going now? Because they have found great success with
Mhm.
Mandalorian so far.
I think for the immediate future, they're counting on Disney Plus to build the fan base. They have the Obi-Wan series coming out. They have the Cassian of Andor series
Hmm.
coming out. Is there another cartoon series coming out as well? I believe
There's some
animated.
rumored ones that
Yeah, there's an animated series I believe coming out. Mandalorian is hitting on all cylinders. That's the biggest hit for Disney Plus, I
mhm.
believe, by far. So let's go with what works.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the solo show was so wrought with the solo show, the solo movie was so wrought with issues backstage that it affected the box office
Yeah.
attendance. It was I to me it was one of my favorite Star Wars movies, along with Rogue One, the Star Wars story.
Yeah.
These standalone movies, I
Hmm.
really hope they continue to do them. Um, I don't think they'll ever. Will they go back to doing a trilogy series? Is the question. I think more so than will they go to doing a standalone movie.
Yeah.
I don't see them ever doing a Mandalorian movie. Um, I don't think people would. I think they're smart enough that people wouldn't go to that. It would be interesting to see what they come up with, though.
Hmm.
You know that Disney's got something in the books to make a movie. But
Well,
for the time being, yeah, it's going to be Disney Plus. Disney Plus is going to be what's holding the ship for Star Wars.
and I remember during the first season of Mandalorian, and I know this wouldn't be consistent with the timeline, but I kept expecting to see the Mandalorian visit Black Spire Outpost at some point.
Hmm.
Because I was thinking, all of this talk of let's have things in theaters on Disney Plus in the parks, and let's have all of this synergy. I thought, okay, you're at some point going to see him visit Black Spire Outpost, and then the very next day in the parks, there's going to be the Mandalorian, and he's going to be carrying around a child. Um, and then after the season concluded, and I saw that it didn't happen, I thought, that's really interesting. And then I did kind of come around to thinking that, well, I think what is so popular about The Mandalorian right now is it's something new for people that are not fans that they can get into. It's also something new for people who are fans and who may have had mixed reactions at best to the most recent trilogy. Um, like you mentioned Solo. Solo is the top three movies for me, I think, because it's
Yeah,
just fun. I mean,
yeah.
it's basic. It is almost like a comedy. It is kind of that partner buddy comedy. Um, but the reception that and some of the other movies got, I think Mandalorian gives people something new to look at. And so then when I came around to that thinking, it made more sense to me that okay, they wouldn't just they wouldn't put him in that world or in that setting, at least now, until there's more synergy, until there's kind of more of a story to back everything up. But yeah, I kind of
They do every once in a while they'll toss in a little hit or tidbit of something
hmm
that is that Black Spirit Outpost.
hmm
This latest episode that came out this week, there's I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but there is a nugget that was given about Black Spire Outpost.
hmm
That
yeah.
was given, yeah.
And one thing that I realized after having visited Walt Disney World is all of the different content around Black Spire Outpost that you can consume now. Like they have standalone books and standalone stories.
Hmm.
They have all these different characters that they could build stories around and they could build series around. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do in the future with, are they going to have um, series specific to Black Spire Outpost? Because then as a fan, you could walk in and you could see, okay, here's where this happened, or
Well,
here's
they
where,
already have a comic book series that came out.
yeah.
I think it was called Galaxy's Edge.
hmm
I bought them. I mean, I read them, and they were cool because they took one thing from Galaxy's Edge and made a story about it.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they're really. And then when you go to the park, you go, hey, this was in the comic book. This is the story of this item, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun experience, and I'm looking forward to when we can safely go back and kind of explore more of it. The the last thing that I'll get your opinion on before we do our last section is with everything going on right now, and what you have. I know you haven't been to the parks like myself, or I haven't been to the parks either. I mean, um,
January of this year would have been the last time I went. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
With everything you have read or seen, consumed about what they're doing right now to keep people safe, um, what are your impressions of what the company is doing with the parks and looking out for public safety and things like that?
Yeah, that's the tough call, eh? That's the big question. Everyone I talked to through the solo show, every park that opened in the world, I would have somebody who visited those parks opening week, and I interviewed them and talked to them. Did you feel safe? Were you comfortable? Were you nervous go before you went? All of them have said, every single one of them said they were a little bit hesitant before they went.
Mhm.
Once they got there, they felt extremely comfortable. They felt more safe at the Disney park, whether it was Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, Paris. I did all 4 parks of Walt Disney World. Had 4 different people on talking about the different parks. All of them said they felt more safe in those parks than they did in their local grocery store,
Mhm.
which is a slap across the face for me because I work in a grocery store. but but yeah, so they seem to be on the ball. They seem
Yeah.
to be doing the right things. They're insisting you wear a mask. They're maintaining distance. If you get too close, the cast members on you right away saying, hey, don't get too close.
Mhm.
An interesting thing is Walt Disney World in Florida is the only park that has these rest areas where you can actually go and take off your mask.
Mhm.
None of the Hong Kong parks have it, or Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, and Paris. None of them have these areas where you can go take off your mask, which I thought was very, very interesting that they didn't include that in the other parks in the world. Now, Disneyland is a different thing altogether. They just recently opened up uh, Disney California Adventure, Carthay Circle, the Grizzly Rapids area, and Boulevard off to the left. I'm not sure what the name is, for dining and shopping only.
Mhm.
Because of course the California government will not allow them to open up the park fully. I don't know if they're charging for people to get in to do that. I'm assuming it's free to visit, just like it would be downtown Disney in
Yeah.
California. So, but they're doing the proper cleaning. They got the plexiglass up where they need to. Everyone insisting you wear a mask. You're not allowed in regardless if you have medical history or not. You can't get in without a mask. You can't stay there without a mask. They'll ask you to leave. And they seem to be doing the right thing. They're cleaning, between every half hour, every attraction that needs to be cleaned, multi-touch surfaces are being cleaned, spatial distancing, and so yeah, it seems to work. They the numbers are there's gradually allowing more and more people into the
Mhm.
parks. So unfortunately, Paris had to reclose. Their numbers got too high, and they reclosed now. Um, Hong Kong or Shanghai? Hong Hong Kong had to close for a bit. I
Okay.
believe it was one
Yeah.
or the other, Hong Kong or Shanghai. They had to close for a bit, but they're now reopened again, and those countries are doing the right thing to keep their numbers down,
Mhm.
which is what many more countries need to learn
Mhm.
and work on, I feel.
Yeah, it's something everybody takes everybody's effort to everybody's combined effort to get it to
Yeah,
happen. Um,
yeah.
so, well, thank you for telling your story, talking about your podcasts, your content. The last segment that I like to do with everybody, especially since we started doing these one-on-one visits during the pandemic, is just kind of a rapid fire section where um, I'll ask a question, like it'll be a favorite question, a favorite whatever. You can explain as much as you want. You don't have to explain anything at all. That's completely up to you.
Hmm.
You correct me if I'm wrong. You've been to Walt Disney World. You've been to Disneyland.
Hmm.
Um, have you been to any of the have you been to any of the international
No,
parks?
I haven't been overseas at all, but Tokyo is my number one goal. Is
Okay.
That's my number one. You got the bucket list, the very
Yeah.
top. It's Tokyo. That's
Well,
me.
and I've heard Tokyo Disney, and especially Disney Sea
Hmm.
is just supposed to be kind of the pinnacle of the parks and what can be done, I guess, with a blank check, right? Um, so, favorite resort, and by that I mean Walt Disney World or Disneyland.
Um, Favorite resort that I can afford is Pop Century. Favorite resort that I can sort of afford is Port Orleans Riverside,
Okay,
and favorite resort that I can't afford is Polynesian.
okay. Um, and the Polynesians getting their retheme
Hmm.
to engage more people, which I think is nice because that I think Moana has been absent from the parks for quite a or just absent from the parks in general.
And
Uh,
they're going to do it right. Disney's going to do it right when they add Moana. It's not
yeah.
going to be over your head with it.
Um, so any of the parks you've been to, you mentioned something earlier. Favorite ride,
That'd be Rise of Resistance.
Rise of Resistance.
Yeah,
Since what would be your favorite you could think of as classic ride, or if you had if you picked something besides Rise of Resistance?
Well, okay, my second favorite ride would be Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not do anything that goes too fast, too spins, drops. I don't do any of those. I avoid all the mountains, all this
Yeah.
anything that goes too fast. Anything that's been teacups, no. The classic attractions would now be in my third category, my favorites. And again, it's a tough pick between Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
They're so close. That'd be yeah.
Completely understand. Yeah. The
Depending on the day,
what's that?
depending on the day would which one's my favorite between those two.
Yeah. Um, favorite. So out of Walt Disney World, out of the Disneyland Resort, 6
Mhm.
different parks. What's your favorite park?
It used to be Magic Kingdom.
Okay.
Actually, it used to be Disneyland. Is what used to be. Actually, I guess I could still say Disneyland. But Hollywood Studios has really shot up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular is like one of my favorite show. Toy Story Land is amazing. Of course, Galaxy's now Disneyland also has Galaxy's Edge, so I could cheat and say
Yeah.
Disneyland that way you still get Galaxy's Edge in there and you still get Rise of Resistance. So
Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, I completely agree with. That's one of the first shows I remember. And we go every time. We see that every time we go to the parks, and hopefully that's coming back post pandemic,
yeah,
post
yeah.
situation. So anywhere in the parks, favorite restaurant, parks, resorts.
Uh, my favorite restaurant. Wow, I've never. You know what? I gotta say, the fish and chip shop in the UK
Okay.
is
Yeah.
something that I go to every single
Yeah.
visit, and that's probably I try to try something different every trip. But the UK fish and chips is I don't think I've ever done a trip without getting that
Yeah.
fish and chips and sitting in the back and just relaxing for a bit, enjoying the view of the spaceship Earth across the World Showcase Lagoon. So relaxing, so beautiful, and a great deal for for a light snack. Uh, so that's probably the one I've eaten at the most. That
Okay.
is the one I've eaten at the most. I don't know about. I'm trying to think of a table service. There's so many good ones. Boathouse
Yeah.
ranks up there. Yeah, I
Okay.
had such a good meal there. Yeah,
Um,
probably Boathouse.
so when I go to the parks,
Ooh, Sanaa, Ohana.
I
Yeah.
know now now it
Forgot about
starts
Sanaa.
flowing.
Sanaa's good.
When
Ohana's
when I go to the parks, I'm typically doing fast service.
good. Yeah.
Uh, I agree with the fish and chips. They are amazing. I we're at a point now where whether if I'm going by myself on a conference or I have my family, we're not really looking at table service right now just because of the age of everybody.
Mhm.
But one thing I do is I pretty much eat my weight in treats when I go.
Yes.
Any park, Disney Springs, Downtown Disney included, favorite treat.
Hands down, the carrot cake cookie at the
Okay.
Trolley Cafe in Hollywood Studios, or
I've
Starbucks if you want to call it that. Yeah, hands down, the carrot cake cookie
I've never
is
tried that. I'll have to try
oh, get out of here. Apparently they're not
it.
serving it right now during COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's something every Disney fan has to do.
Okay.
Is the and then popcorn is I
Mhm.
get the refillable popcorn every visit, and I have it with me my entire time, and it's always full.
Yeah.
And as soon as it's empty, I refill it. Yeah, so the popcorns is something that I don't again I don't do a lot of table service either because if I'm going on myself, I have no problem standing in line by myself, going shopping myself, doing attractions by myself. But for some reason, doing a quick service dining by myself is fine. A
Mhm.
table service, I just feel it's a waste of time and a waste of money to do it by myself.
Yeah.
Now, if you and I were going to meet up at the park and say, "Hey, let's go for dinner," absolutely, let's go to a table service.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to add that treat to my list.
Yes,
And I'll have to look into some table service if we ever meet, if anybody else meets in the parks, maybe when my kids get a little older and we can kind of spend more time along with that.
My
Um,
goal is to get every single table service at least once.
yeah,
So I very seldom go to a second one again.
yeah.
I do them more than twice.
What's your favorite table service that you've been to?
Well, yeah, like I say, Sanaa is really good, and Boathouse was really good. But again,
Okay.
you know what? I'm thinking about it. It was more the company than it was the food.
Okay.
But when I do the table service restaurants,
Yeah.
it's Ohana
So
was amazing.
the this could be in the parks, movies, anything. It could be any of the subsidiaries, Star Wars, Marvel, any of that. Favorite character?
Huh. Anything.
And yeah, any Disney
You know what? I
property.
think I have to go with Kermit the Frog.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
yeah. No matter how nuts those Muppets are, and no matter for the most part, he keeps his cool, keeps a level head. I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes he loses it, but he's always seems to be in control.
Okay.
And you have to admire that about him.
Yeah.
Once in a while, he yells at Piggy and freaks out on Fozzie, but for the most part, he's
Yeah.
he's got it under control, regardless of the mayhem going on around him.
Yeah.
Not too many people can do that.
That's true. That's true. It's a good, good trait to have. Good characteristic to have.
Yeah.
The last thing, and this isn't necessarily rapid fire, but because you have been on several solo trips, um, what advice would you give someone who has never been to Disney, on enjoying the park? And that's kind of that mixture of doing what you can, um, but enjoying the park, not necessarily, have your list of 30 rides that you have to get on, and if you don't get on them, then it's not a successful trip. What would be your advice to someone going for their first time?
For someone going for their first time, number one, research. Do as much research as you can. Uh, I've heard people go to the parks, go to Walt Disney World, and they come back and they said, I didn't do anything other than
Mhm.
standing in line. And that's because you didn't plan. You have to plan. I would say number two is get a travel agent. They don't cost anything. They do all the work for you. They do all the booking for you, and Disney pays them, not you. A lot of people think that a travel agent, and if they are charging you, they get a different travel agent. I have no sponsor in any of my podcasts that is a travel agent, and there's a lot of them out there. I know which one I use, and I use it more because they're a friend and I need to use them, and it's kind of to help out a friend more than anything. But yeah, no, I would say get a travel agent, let them book things for you. They know where you should book for dining, where you should book, what attractions, fast passes you should get for sure.
Okay.
And listen to podcasts. If you
Yeah.
haven't gone before, you can get a lot of information from podcasts.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're all great, but the solo show and Grand Circle Tour in particular are really good.
Are you more of the mindset of go to attractions, do as many attractions as you can, or walk around, take your time, maybe sit on a bench and people watch for a little bit?
Yeah, I used to be have to hit every attraction. After you've gone enough times, the attraction, small world is a small world every
Yeah.
time. The dolls aren't going to do something different your 100th time. They're
Yeah.
all doing the same thing every time. So if I don't get on an attraction, it's not a big deal for me. I mean, like I'll have goals when I go. Like I've never ridden Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railroad yet, so next
Yeah.
time I go, that's going to be something I have to do is Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railroad. Will it ruin my trip if it's down when I'm there? Probably not. I'd be disappointed, but it's not going to ruin my trip.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, I take it easy. I don't even, and I don't do much planning. When I go now on a, particularly on a solo trip, unless I'm meeting up with somebody, when I leave the resort, I go to the bus that has the shortest line
Hmm.
or the first bus that shows up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what park I'm going to that day.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do that nowadays with having to book that stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, for that's how I like to do things. I just have a park hopper and I'll do 4 parks before noon.
Yeah.
if I, if I, in, you know.
So what is for people who want to either get a hold of you, follow you, follow any of the podcasts and the content? Uh, could you give them kind of the easiest way to consume your content?
Well, thank you. Probably the best thing is to go to Stan Solo
Okay.
on Facebook. I'm always posting stuff on the solo show about the solo show and Grand Circle Tour on there, and Disney Night Live, and then I'm starting to do Womp Rat Radio. Or if you want to just the Grand Circle Tour podcast is easy to find. The solo show is very hard to find on Facebook.
Okay.
Maybe if you search the solo show podcast, it'd be easier to find. For whatever reason, the solo show doesn't mean the solo show every country.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
it's a lot of people think it's a song, it's a pod or a website or a Facebook page about music
Yeah.
and people playing guitar solo
Hmm.
or singing solo. I get so many every day. I get somebody wanting to join the group that isn't into Disney at all.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, if you search the solo show or if you search Stan Solo on Podtunes, iTunes, uh, usually the ones I'm on come up.
Okay. All right. Well, and again, Stan,
thank,
thank you so much for this.
thank
Uh,
you.
this was awesome. This is, as I said, the coolest part about being able to teach this class is having these types of conversations, and getting to meet other fans, and kind of find out everyone's story. I think everybody has a story to tell, and there definitely are people who don't want to tell their story. I think a lot of people want to tell their story, especially when it's Disney.
Mhm.
My experience is when you ask somebody a question about Disney, you have to set a time limit because if they're a big Disney fan, you're going to turn into a 4-hour conversation, which maybe was intended to be a 10-minute conversation, right? Um, so thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining us, and take care. We'll see you later.
Thank you. This was a lot of great. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being on.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.